we will do the same fun thing we do every week. We are checking the reactions to, you guessed it, Piers Morgan interview with Bassem Youssef, round 2. Piers flew all the way from London to Los Angeles to make a second interview with Bassem Youssef amidst the war on Gaza, because the first interview was a hit.
It's like being in a relationship with a narcissistic psychopath.
The most viewed in the history of the program.
We became the biggest in our show's history, with more than 20 million people so far watching.
So I think he thought, like, let's maintain the viewership and use the trend that we created. So of course he would fly to Los Angeles to speak to the Egyptian comedian who trended big time while speaking about the issue using his satire and which honestly seemed to be the only thing that made sense of all of this farce.
يعني عبط احنا بقى.
And ironically, he made it sound like he's making Bassem a favor.
Last time, obviously we did it remotely, and you complained that it was an unfair situation. So I've done my bit.
So he flew more than 6 hours, thousands of miles to achieve fairness in discussing the Palestinian issue in LA with Egyptian comedian. Not for the views, not for the clicks. We will check the reactions, but let me tell you, this interview lasted for 2 hours. The first chunk, almost 30 minutes, was all about Bassem, the person who made the trend, because Piers made him famous in the Western world, as he said.
You know, one of the things I heard a lot was, who is this guy? And they weren't talking about me.
And the second part of the interview was more about analyzing the previous interview and the reaction, and then a thorough discussion about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Not just what's happening today, but also what happened in the past.
This is a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews.
Now let's see how people reacted to this interview. Piers Morgan realized that he was interviewing not only a comedian, but also an intelligent, intellectually highly educated heart surgeon. So he decided to fly to LA for a second half interview, hoping he could score this time. I think it's quite obvious that Piers is not just trying to educate, but to become famous with his show. That was quite obvious when Piers insisted on getting a statement from Bassem that Hamas are a terror group.
You believe Hamas is a terror group?
I'm not a big fan of Hamas.
Are they terrorists, do you think?
Yeah.
Take the land but leave the homeless man. How to tell someone they have no culture without telling them they have no culture. He's quoting Bassem Youssef.
Suddenly I'm thinking of like Israeli feta cheese. Israeli hummus. Oh, that's an insult. Israeli hummus. Come on. I mean, take the land, but leave the hummus, man. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not fair.
Piers was not prepared for this history. What a man Bassem is.
People, 1950, Yemenis immigrants that came from Yemen, and they were in the transition camp waiting to be transferred into Israel. Their kids were taken away from them and given to white Ashkenazi Jews because they were not white enough.
But Bassem
brilliantly used this opportunity to educate people on the issue. We have heard voices defending the oppressed Palestinians, but this could be one of the most effective, because Bassem dwelled so much about the history of the issue, not just what happened on the 7th of October onwards. This is the kind of interviews Piers should align himself with, rather than a shouting match. And his 2 famous questions. This was very educational and informative. 2 hours felt like 10 minutes, and my head wasn't hurting by the end of it. Piers was really listening the entire time, which was so surprising, but he also repeated the same questions he asked every time.
What is a proportionate response? What is a proportionate response? To be proportionate. What is proportionate? I don't know what a proportionate response is. The question for me becomes down to what is proportionate? The question then becomes again about proportion.
I love this comment, and it makes sense nowadays. We live in a world where comedians make more sense than politicians. Can't believe how much I learned because of this interview. I'm questioning everything and everyone moving forward. I love this comment as well, because it means that people are no longer accepting the messages of the media passively without thinking and doing their own bit of research. Well, this part about ChatGPT literally made my heart cry. When Bassem asked about ChatGPT, do the Israelis deserve freedom? ChatGPT answered yes. And when Bassem asked, do the Palestinians deserve freedom? It answered, this is complicated.
And I asked ChatGPT, do Palestinians deserve to be free? And you know what they tell me? it is complex.
This response completely destroyed me. The world does not see the Palestinians as ordinary human beings like the Israelis. They are so insignificant in the eyes of the world that the Israeli Minister of Defense called them human animals. Someone is quoting Bassem, Youssef, "You are someone who has always spoken against cancel culture, but right now a whole culture is being cancelled." Genius, Bassem. See the clip.
You are someone who's always spoken against cancel culture. Right now, a whole culture is cancelled.
I love that he bought him olive oil, and he's quoting Bassem. Olive tree lives for 600 years and passed from generation to generation. Bassem with the hidden messages. Clap, clap, clap. I appreciate how Bassem concluded his interview while offering Piers food, stating Israel uprooting 800 olive trees that were hundreds of years old.
This is like amazing oil coming from the olive tree. Since 1967, Israel have actually uprooted 800,000 olive tree.
That is absolutely delicious.
So I believe this 2 hours interview was historically very rich and also provided an insight about how Israelis and Palestinians feel about what's happening today. And although Piers Morgan was trying to put on the mask of the fair, unbiased and empathetic journalist, he really could not maintain that at times.
I'm really struggling to see what else Israel is supposed to do to get rid of Hamas. How do you do that? And I don't know any other way other than the way Israel is currently doing. We don't even know if the casualty numbers are correct.
But I really like that Bassem did not fall into the trap of making such a complex and sensitive issue a trend for the views and the clicks.
Now this time I'm ready for you, okay?
On his Instagram page right before the interview, he posted this post with a photo from the interview with Piers Morgan. A deep, calm conversation about a very complicated issue. I tried to talk to an audience who never get exposed to our side of the story. No sound bites, no trending phrases, no attempts to score points for reach and views. I hope it will be something that will be used for a longer time, not just for the heat of the moment. And I think Piers was not ready for that, and that's why he titled the video Bassem Youssef Returns. I think the title should be changed if you want it as a reference for people when they are looking up things on the internet, because it's no longer a sensational Bassem Youssef Return kind of interview. It's more of a deep conversation about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm sure this interview will be controversial and people will have different opinions about it, but it's definitely not sensational, and at the end I think it's worth watching. Don't forget to share this video. Keep talking about the atrocities. The narrative is changing, and I have a proof for you.
The Palestinian people should be free.
Piers said it. Let me know in the comments what you think of this interview, and if you want me to analyze a specific content from the media.